Welcome to the Dialogue KE. Now, tonight, the technical team of the Azimio and Kenya Kwanza Dialogue Committee are yet to agree on the main agenda items of discussions, with the two sides presenting competing priorities. The talks are yet to officially begin, and Azimio's deadline of 30 days is almost halfway. To help us dissect on the matter, I am now joined by Eric Mukono, a political analyst. Karibu sana.
Asante.
It has been a minute since you are on the show.
Yeah, sure.
Just before we begin our main discussion for tonight, it's 10 years of devolution.
Yes.
10 years down the line.
Yes.
Is devolution working for us?
Well, I would say to some extent it is working. To a larger extent, devolution has worked because the aim of devolution was to decentralize government, to bring power to the people and such, and as well to also bring resources to the people. So in some cases, in some counties that have gotten good leadership, devolution has helped them. But to some other counties, still some growth to happen, but it all goes down to the leadership within the counties.
The counties.
Yes, but it has, in generally, compared to what we had before, I think devolution was a good idea, and if we implement it well, even in the coming years, we could see a very good nation.
All right. Let's now get to the main discussion of tonight. And we are seeing the talks between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. And finally, they are coming to the table to talk, but the talks are not yet happening. They're actually making everything, they're just setting the agendas for the meeting, but actually have not even agreed on the main agenda. Why are we seeing the delay in the talks?
Now, Ken, there's one thing we need to first appreciate. The last time I was seated here with Esther, we agreed on one thing, at least we both agreed on one thing, that there was need for us as a nation and the two factions of the two political factions, that is both Kenya Kwanza and Azimio, to have a sober discussion, and a discussion around how we're going to make this country better and to bring an end to the demonstrations that we've been seeing. So the fact that now we are having the bipartisan talks, whether they are going to, it is a good point for us to begin, that we are having the discussions. Now, the fact that they have not agreed on the agenda, again, is also another worrying thing. Because from the very word go, both teams had issues they had, Azimio on one end, 4 issues. One of the issues is the cost of living. The something to do with elections.
Actually, it's reopening of the election servers, electoral reforms, guarantees on non-interference in affairs of opposition parties.
Exactly, and we've had the Azimio Secretary General, or the ODM Secretary General, before even tell us that this has nothing to do with the elections and all that. All we want now is for us to sort the cost of living. So for me, I actually expected it to be a very simple thing for them to agree on, that let us first sort the cost of living, and then some of these things, we can have them sorted later. I mean, we still have 4 years before we get to the next election, So for me, I am feeling that this is, unlike in the interest of Kenyans, these bipartisan talks, and especially from the side of the opposition, are more linked to their individual interests rather than the interest of the common mwananchi. Because if indeed they had the common mwananchi at hand, then they would really be very keen on first having the cost of living sorted.
But you said about the opposition, because actually the Kenya Kwanza side do not have the high cost of living. So when you say that it's only the opposition that have their own personal interest, I guess you're doing a disservice to Kenyans. Since actually Kenya Kwanza, some of the issues are the constitution of IBC, implementation of the 2/3 gender rule, entrenchment of Constituency Development Fund, that is CDF, establishment of the leader of opposition, and embedding of the office of Prime Cabinet Secretary in statute. So actually Kenya Kwanza have nothing to do with the high cost of living.
With the high, because they are the ones who have gotten us there. You know, we already at a very bad state. And you see, the reason why we had demonstrations, at least from the Kenyan side, not from the political side, from the Kenyan side, it was because of what the government has, where the government has led us, you know. The fact that the cost of living was extremely high, you know. Azimio was probably not protesting because of the high cost of living, probably because of the servers and all that. But because the reason why the Kenyans went on the streets, it's because, and so it's because of the high cost of living. And so you do not expect that the cost of living would be part of the agendas of the Kenya Kwanza government. Because when you mention the high cost of living, they know that the bipartisan talks are going to touch on the Finance Act, you know, which already somehow it has been slid under the table, and no one is talking about it now, and Kenyans have been assimilated into it, and everyone is now comfortable, you know. But still, everything else that has been raised is still very valid, because part of the reason why we are where we are as a nation is because we've not had a look at how our elections are carried out in this nation, you know. And so after every 5 years, we have a side that is dissatisfied or is uncomfortable about how the elections, about the election outcome. And so because they are uncomfortable and they feel that the side that has won has been unfair, then they end up in the streets, you know. And that is what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 general elections, you know. And so we need to have a discussion, of course, around our elections, you know, around our electoral processes, you know, so that we avoid a situation where the opposition, where we have the winner take all, you know, where the person who wins the elections takes all the government, you know, and we have no place for the leader of opposition, you know. They will not be, they are taking account of the government. You're taking the government to account while out there in the cold. And so, as I mentioned last time, the last time I was here,
but
that we need to have a discussion, you know, around how to incorporate the people who have been thrown out in the cold.
So this, the leader of opposition, the official leader of opposition,
yes,
will have his own or her own office,
yes,
right? Funded, fully funded by the
people of Kenya, yes.
Yeah, and do you think that the opposition leader will actually do the role, because actually he's being funded by the government, and whatever the government says is what the opposition leader will do?
Very interesting. But you see, I would want to think that we are a nation that abides by the law. It's an assumption. So if we have the office of the leader of opposition, then there should not be an issue of a government, because it is going to be a constitutional office, not depending on the executive or anything. But at least when the budget is going to be read, we have a portion for the office of the opposition. You know, at least if the president is very keen on accountability, he has been talking about, we want to be accountable to the people. We want the opposition to hold us accountable, you know, and all that.
Talking of the opposition,
he is
holding them accountable.
Yes.
We actually saw a lot of opposition MPs, quote unquote, being bought, and most of them actually, some of them crossed over to the government side. You know, they say whoever feeds you controls you. The same thing with the office of the official leader of opposition.
No, that's a very different case, because that's freedom of association. You know, you are allowed to move. You are allowed to associate yourself with any political party.
But if you actually wanted an opposition that will keep him accountable, why go to the extent of actually getting MPs from the other side to have numbers?
I think I would want to think that's an allegation, because we've not seen anywhere where the president has coerced members, you know, to move to his side. These are members who probably are moving there for their own probably selfish interests, or probably because they feel if I was in government, because probably when you look at some of these MPs who are moving, for example, the MP for Ugenya, you know, is called Honorable Chieng, you know. Now, the Nyanza side of this country has been out of government for the longest time, you know. And so probably I would want to think and probably get into his shoes and think, probably, if I was him, I would also think that this would be an opportunity for me to go into government and probably have my people benefit. And for the first time, we've seen the people of Nyanza benefit. We had the president, even before the lapse of his first year in government, we have seen him in Homa Bay County. You know, we have seen him in Siaya. You know, and every time he has gone there with goodies. Unlike before, when you know, we didn't have the leadership.
But
just
actually,
go out
you
there.
just talked about the devolution, and you say that counties are actually doing their best. So if maybe your area is not advanced, you have to blame the county government. You actually say that.
No, but you see, these counties, of course, there's some dependency on the national government. Actually, there's 100%, 90 to 95% dependency on the national government, because you hear them dispersing money to the counties every other time, you know. So I was referring with leadership. I was referring to having a person who has the capability of being able to manage the resources that they get and being able to grow their county to an extent that the residents of that county are able to benefit from the resources that come in.
Yeah.
You understand?
Okay, let's shift gears from that. 30 days are almost over. The Azimio demands. They said actually the talks should be done within 30 days. We're on the 14th day of August. Close to half a month, the end of the month. And they said actually after the 30 days, we'll go back to the streets. And the talks are yet to begin.
You see, one of the demands from Kenya Kwanza is an end to street protests. And you see, when you're bargaining for something, then there has to also be that agreement. You cannot, of course, in one instance you're bringing in demands, or in another instance you're threatening the person you want to talk to. You know, you cannot go to woo a girl. I don't know whether Ken you're single. You cannot go to woo a girl, but at the same time you're still threatening them to accept what you're telling them. You know, so there has to, of course, be that balance between what the threats that Azimio has put on board. So it is, you may not, if they are true to their words and if they are true to this process, then we should not see them going back to the streets. You know, let's have, I think it is for the common good of this nation and the citizens of this nation. So I feel there's no need for us to, or for the opposition to go back to the streets. While we have the table here, you know, when we have a window or an opportunity for us to talk, and the government has not refused. You know, the government has not denied the opposition a listening ear. All they are doing is, let's put everything in order. Let's come up with a technical committee that is going to decide what are the things that we are going to handle, what are the agendas that we are going to talk about, so that we first agree, and then after we have agreed on what we are going to talk about, on the discussions you're going to have, then we can move forward for the common of the Mwananchi.
Actually, we might be seeing a different form of demonstrations, because I guess it was on Friday last week, whereby the Azimio leader Raila Odinga said that people are actually going to demonstrate from their homes. They're not going to move out because of the police, quote-unquote, brutality, where many Kenyans lost their lives. So do you think that will work?
Hey, I would want to
Kenyans
see that.
not going to work.
I would want to see that form of demonstration, because it can never work. Because it's not something that can work. Because if you ask a Mama Mboga not to go to work and demonstrate from home, then what is she going to eat in the evening? You know, and you see some of these people are people who live from hand to mouth. You know, whatever they get today is what they consume. You know, they make to consume. So I don't think unless we have very idle people, we may not see. That's a high level, or how would I call it? It's a very interesting way of demonstrating. I would also I would be curious to see how that would happen.
All right. So actually, yesterday, Azimio leader Raila Odinga met the quote-unquote handshake merchant, the Delaware Senator Chris Coons, the same person who actually brought about the handshake between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga in 2018. The same thing is happening. Are we foreseeing a handshake?
It's a very interesting name that you gave him, a handshake merchant. I think from how I have known and listened to Kenya Kwanza, and probably how I've heard Ruto and even leave Ruto out of this, probably how I've heard Gachagua talk, Rigiji, we are very far from having a handshake. We may have talks, but this time round, I have a feeling the handshake merchant may not get through, because the type of leaders we have now, and the people we have in government now, are very tough. You know, they are very, would I call it, rigid to bring in the opposition. Because if it is true that the president and his government would want accountability, then I am sure they are not going to allow a handshake. They are not going to allow nusu mkate. And also look at when the handshake came in the last regime. It didn't come in the first 5 years of Uhuru Kenyatta. It came in the second, in his second term. Because Uhuru Kenyatta knew there was nothing to lose, even if I allowed this guy into government, you know. But right now, Ruto has everything to lose if he allowed a handshake. You know, he's going to probably lose MPs who have been really against the opposition coming into government. And probably from how I have heard and from how they've been talking, if that is anything to go by, then we do not expect a handshake.
Because actually a lot is not being said, but a lot is being seen. You know, the same thing happened. Actually, it's the second time that the senator is in the country to talk to Raila Odinga. And actually, we've seen the president, Ruto, has actually termed him as the, how can I put it? Okay, the word has just disappeared. But it's actually the elder, the East African region, Museveni. We saw the former president meeting Museveni just in a span of, I guess it was 2 weeks ago. And then a week later, we have seen President William Ruto visiting Museveni.
I think that is the only handshake that we are looking forward to. I think if anyone is able to read between the lines, then Museveni, having worked with both Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto and President William Ruto, of course, not considering Mwai Kibaki and Moi, and probably worked even with Kenyatta, I think there is a very high likelihood of a handshake between the former president and the current president, because you see the kind of,
so it's between the former president,
and the current president.
Why are they doing a handshake?
Because you see the kind of things we've been seeing recently, the kind of tussle we've been seeing between the government and the former president, you know, going after the president at night and the family, you know, it's a shaming, you know. This is a former president, somebody who has who has been a honorable leader in this country, a distinguished leader in this country, you know, being humiliated, him and his family, his children, you know, his mother. I mean, there's a level of respect that we need to treat him as a country, and the government needs to treat him being the former president, you know. And so these Museveni, I agree with Museveni and everyone else who's advocating for that handshake. that we need to have those two leaders meet, and let's treat the former president in a honorable way. However bad they treated the current government or the current president, you know. And the reason why there would be a handshake is just to avoid, you know, that tussle, that disrespect, you know, that shame that comes with the government terrorizing the former president. I mean, it doesn't stand well, both for the citizens of this nation and even for the, you know, for the international community. I don't think it sits well. So there is need for that handshake.
So the handshake is between the former president,
and the current president. And we will sit here one day and say that you remember the discussion that we had, and here is the handshake.
I mean, and where do you place the former prime minister in this?
Well, you know, politics is all about interests.
Yeah.
And said it's a game of interest. And so most probably the former president is right now where he is. He's now defending his interests, you know, because he has realized now the former prime minister, they lost elections. He is now coming into terms that he has his candidate lost. And so what can we salvage from this, you know, from all these? So the former prime minister, for him, he's going to just play an accountability role, you know, to just oversee that, to just hold the government to account. That's the only work he's going to be left with. On the handshake, that one I can bet it is never going to happen with the current president.
Okay, they say the more things change, the more they remain the same. And you see, we've been in this situation each and every time, you know?
True.
Do you think that our politics is experiencing some stunted growth? Because we find ourselves in the same situation after every election.
I mean, yes. And that is why I said when we started that we need a conversation. Because, I mean, some of the things that we are struggling with now, we've struggled with these things right since independence, you know? So it is good that we are opening ourselves, and the both sides of the political divide are open to have a conversation. And so there's need for us to address some of these things so that we don't remain. It is very bad when you get your son or daughter 5-6 years down the line, that they'll still find the same situation that we are in. I mean, it's a real mess, Ken. It's a real mess that every time we have an election, every time we have campaigns and all that, we are still back into the same mess. I mean, if things go the way they are going, it is very predictable of what is going to happen in 2027. And so instead of us, because we have the time between now and then to make things better, then we need to have a conversation of how we're going to get ourselves out of this mess. You know, it is very bad for us to be in a hole and still keep digging the same hole.
Right now, the country is so peaceful. There are no demonstrations.
Yes, exactly.
Kenyans are going about their businesses. Is this a sign of some good? How can I put? Is there hope now that we have these talks?
I mean, there is hope, Ken, if everyone who's part of that bipartisan talks is genuine. I have been thinking to myself today, how genuine are these people who have been picked to lead these bipartisan talks? And I thought to myself, if they are genuine, then there is hope. But there is a very high likelihood, Ken, I would call it a 0.8 probability that these people are not very genuine.
The good thing is a 0.8.
Is 0.8 chance that they are not genuine. So the genuinity is a very
minute,
a very small margin that they are. We may end up seeing a collapse of these bipartisan talks, like we had months ago when we had the parliamentary talks, you know. So, but let's be optimistic that this is going to work, and and if it works, it is going to be for the good of the Kenyans, because this is going to be a good space for Kenyans to invest, for them to do business, and to also work to pay taxes. You know, there's already a lot of taxes that we are required to pay. We have the housing tax and levy and the fuel, you know, and all that. You know, we need peace for us to look for money to give to the government.
So we need to keep on talking as a nation.
We need to have that conversation. That is if these people are really genuine with having these talks. But remember what I told you, that there is a very huge chance that these talks may be not very genuine.
But let's hope for the future that things will be okay.
Let's be optimistic.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. That's a very good point to end the conversation right there. They say when you stop talking, the moment you stop talking is the moment you start fighting. And as a nation, it's very important that we have these talks. And thank you so much, Eric, for your time. We really do appreciate. That has been Eric Mukono, a political analyst. Many thanks to you for watching the Dialogue KE. On behalf of the whole team that made this broadcast a success, have yourselves a blessed night. My name is Kennedy Kimani.